In short-lived detective series Tucker's Witch, a married couple solves crimes with a little help from the wife's extra psychic abilities. In a twist, Ted Danson plays the villain. In another twist, producers recast the leads and refilmed the pilot for air. In another twist, talk about both. Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to Battle of the Network shows. I'm Mike.
And I'm Rick. Hello, everyone.
This week we're going to look at two versions of the same show. The show is called Tucker's Witch, which is on Amazon Prime and some other places, right? There's some Roku deal.
Yes, I think the distributor FilmRise has a channel and the whole series is on there. But if I'm not mistaken, I think it's fair to say neither one of us had strong memories of this show. And it showing up on Amazon Prime was one of the things that brought it to your attention, right? And our attention?
Brought it to your attention.
Oh, so you're putting the finger on me.
Because you peruse whatever sites and aggregators and stuff. You always know what's on stuff.
I have mysterious ways, yes.
Like when I tell you about something, you're like, oh, yeah, it's been there for 2 months. I'm like, what?
I hope I'm not that cavalier about it. I appreciate the tips, but... Now,
in the scale of things, I know we have other friends where they'll tell us about something and it's like, well, that's been there for 2 years. I'm more on top of it than some other people we know, but you're at the top.
I'm a little obsessive about it. Let's just call it as it is. I'm not necessarily proud of that, but I tend to try to be aware because I'm particularly interested in when shows from the BOTNS era come to streaming. So it really gets my attention when the big shows and even in an obscure show. In fact, I almost get more excited when one of these obscure shows comes there, because you would never expect it.
Yeah, so you seemed excited, and you told me, and I think you told our Facebook group, too. And then you didn't watch it at all. I checked it out.
Yeah.
And I admit I sort of enjoyed it. I did enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
We finally got around to it, but it does have an interesting sort of history. It's not that long a thing to talk about, but it's certainly unique and a bit of a weird thing in the annals of TV history, I think.
I think it gives us a chance to talk about an aspect of the production process that we haven't really gotten into, the whole notion of a pilot and the fate of that pilot and possibly being retooled. So yeah, I think that's the real interesting part here, is how there's two versions of the same episode, as you said, for this one. Other than that, there's not a lot of information about this series out there. Understandably so. I think it only lasted, like 13 episodes, something like that.
So it's 12 and then the unaired pilot, which, it's interesting in itself that they put that up there for people to see.
It's very interesting. It's almost like, it's not like you had to pad it out, I'm imagining. Like, I don't think Amazon Prime, gave them an extra $1 million or something because they unearthed this rare gem. But I think it also speaks to what I find cool about Amazon Prime Video right now, or these days, is that they put all kinds of weird stuff up there, and they're willing to put that on, whereas most of these streaming platforms wouldn't even bother with a show like this, let alone, okay, let's take the 12 aired episodes, and yeah, you got unaired, go ahead and put that on too. We'll call it the unaired pilot and put it at the beginning of the list. I think that's great.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe their system is different, and it's like all their other vendor things where you can kind of just submit stuff. I get that feeling sometimes, but I don't think it is. I'm sure they're negotiating contracts and whatnot, but
it may well be. But the fact is short, failed TV series like this are on Prime Video, and they're not on many of the other ones, unless there's something particularly notable about them. But like this year, we've had major services like Peacock and HBO Max have started, and there's very little in anything rare in television. HBO Max, there's hardly any old television at all. So I'm particularly grateful that Prime Video has oddball shows like this on there, because there's no other way to get them unless somebody's uploaded them to YouTube, or in this case, I think it's FilmRise has the rights to it, and for whatever reason, they're putting it up on their little scene streaming platform.
Yeah. Or is it film? It's some other thing. It starts with an M.
Like Multicom.
Yeah, Multicom.
I think Multicom might have some agreement with. I could be wrong on that, but I think on that channel there's other stuff that the FilmRise stuff is everywhere, and somehow on the FilmRise channel they've got like the 1966 Batman shows on there. they have streaming distribution rights to that somehow.
What?
Yeah, I don't know. A show that took 20 years to get it on home video is free on streaming because FilmRise has the rights to it.
And are they like the new prints of them, do you think? Or are they...
That I don't know.
And then I wonder, isn't that on like one of the MeTV type channels?
Yeah, I think MeTV has shown it off and on. Maybe their Heroes and Icons channel. It's like a spinoff of them, but
that's not what we're here to talk about.
No, we're not.
Unfortunately, we can't talk about that. We've done what we could with the Legends of the Superheroes.
Yes. We may find another way to get Batman on the show someday, but...
Yeah, but not that Batman. Yeah, there's not a lot about it, and I kind of looked up the creators, and they're not... I mean, they're just sort of writers. They're not... There's nothing, like, astoundingly notable in their careers. They seem to be writing partners or have been, or were for a while. I know one of them, his credits went as far back as Perry Mason, but...
Wow.
And Outer Limits and things like that. But, it's just... a show. So they made this pilot that CBS bought in 1982, and it starred Kim Cattrall, a young Kim Cattrall, although she's older than she looks. She's like 27, I think. As you said, the esteemed Art Hindle, who I don't know from Adam. Frankly.
Adam Hindle, it's his brother. He was in a lot of shows in the 70s, I think.
So they made the pilot, and they bought, they decided to go to series, and then that summer, Porky's came out and
changed everything. The whole country was different. It would never be the same after the release of Porky's.
It was Porky's Mania.
Yeah.
And I guess Kim Cattrall has a revealing scene or two in that movie.
Yes, it's a racy film.
Right, yeah. And Art Hindle happens to be in it, too.
Yeah, which is odd.
Yeah, and CBS, I think it was CBS and not the producers, fired Kim Cattrall, and Art Hindle walked just because he didn't like the scene. You don't need to put up with this garbage, man.
Yeah.
If it was going to be all chaotic like that, he didn't want it.
An impressively principled move by the esteemed Art Hindle.
Yes.
Art Hindle walked out of more shows in the 80s than, I think Art Hindle originally was going to be Sam Malone in Cheers.
I was going to say the same thing. I think Sam Malone, Magnum P.I.
Yes.
Actually, it was weird because he was also up for Indiana Jones.
Oh.
So not only and then Tom Selleck replaced him as Magnum P.I.
Yeah.
And then it was too late for him to go back to Indiana Jones. He'd kind of turned it down.
Wow.
Because of Magnum P.I. And then they were like, no, we need a guy with a mustache.
Oh, chain reaction.
Yeah.
And another role that Art Hindle turned down, oddly enough, Jessica Fletcher in Murder, She Wrote.
Huh.
He had that role in the pilot, and then he did, it was just too chaotic, and he wasn't sure how many episodes Tom Bosley was going to be in. And he's like, you know what? Until you clear this up, I'm out of here.
And another one, he was going to play Pat Hingle in the Pat Hingle story.
Wow.
I don't know why Pat Hingle wasn't going to play Pat Hingle in the Pat Hingle story, but...
Yeah, and the whole television industry could have been a lot different if not for a few, one could argue, reckless moves by Art Hindle, is it? Yes, okay.
But he's a man of principle.
Yes, he is.
You got to admire that.
I do. I admire him quite a bit. Now, do I admire his performance in this program, Tucker's Witch? Well, that's something we'll get into, I guess. But that's a remarkable story there. I mean, just think about that. Is the network, because the lead actress was in an R-rated movie, kind of demanding that change. That seems a little unusual. Yeah,
that just seems strange. Like, I mean, I could see, like, if it had been... I was going to say Disney, but even that, I don't think they would have cared much.
And it's...
So, I mean, even in the 60s, they had people doing all sorts of... who did edgier stuff. I mean, right. the edge was a different edge then, right. But,
Now, Porky's didn't come out in the early 1960s.
No.
Proto-Porky's.
Does it take...
It's
in the 50s,
I think
right?
It is like a period piece, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I don't remember the story, but...
Yeah.
I don't remember. I have never seen it.
You've only fast-forwarded to the Kim Cattrall scenes. No, that's not true. I'm sorry.
That's not true. I know there's a George Harrison song that was in...
in Porky's.
In Porky's 2, I think.
Porky's 2. Well, clearly George Harrison saw something in Porky's. I must have missed that part of the Martin Scorsese documentary where George Harrison talks about his admiration for Porky's and why he...
It was just like going to the holiday camps when it was obliged to... We had peepholes, too.
Yeah, well... he should have had Handmade Films should have gotten a piece of the Porky's franchise. It could have been like Handmade Films' version of American Pie, and they would have been doing that for like 10, 15 years maybe.
Kim Cattrall was born in Liverpool.
Was she really? I did not know that.
I didn't until something else I saw and happened to look up her background. I mean, I knew she spent time in England and did some acting jobs, like recently in England. And thought, well, that's weird. But the show that I saw her in was like a Swedish show, and she was playing an American, but
Ooh, a Swedish show.
it was like a crime.
Oh, okay.
She was the president.
The president of Sweden?
No, of America, of the U.S. More outrageous, maybe. And she was born in Liverpool, but then I think grew up in Canada.
Kim
I believe
Cattrall's-
Art Hindle is Canadian, too.
Yes, he is. Kim Cattrall's mother didn't happen to be a big devotee of the Cavern Club back in the day, was she? Because Kim Cattrall was in her early 20s around, I'm just kind of doing the math here.
Kim Cattrall, I think, was born in the mid to late 50s.
Okay. All right, so there's probably no connection there.
I don't know. No.
We may have hit on something. See, this is what happens when there's not a lot on the internet or in any reference books about a TV series. We have to do the research ourselves, even if it's just speculative guessing and reckless speculation.
Yeah. Ringo met her mom at a holiday camp. And the rest is...
Yes.
Yeah. Because she, I mean, if anyone's a spitting image of Ringo.
It's Kim Cattrall. I can see that, yeah.
So they replaced her with Catherine Hicks. I guess her biggest role is Seventh Heaven, right?
I think, yeah, fair to say. She was on that, I think, the whole run. And
And Star Trek 4.
Star Trek 4.
I don't know much else.
Yeah, it looks like she has had a pretty prolific career, but there's not a lot of standout roles to me. I mean, the thing that stands out is Seventh Heaven, even though I didn't watch the show. So
And then I guess it's a double standard because Tim Matheson is perfectly fine to replace
yes,
the star of Animal House, a movie you could say maybe even inspired things like Porky's.
right.
It's not a sex comedy exactly, but it's a period piece and it's ribald.
An R-rated comedy. Yeah, a groundbreaking box office smash that he was well known for being in that.
Yeah,
But no guilt by association for him, apparently.
I guess not. No.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't made that connection, but
And I know he had done a lot of TV stuff when he was younger, but still, it's questionable. And they reshot large portions of the pilot, not all of it. There's some shots that clearly they could reuse because they're
Right.
not in the scene, or it's a two shot where they're not in the shot at all, so they can just reuse parts of it.
right. And some of the scenes that they reshot with the different leads, some of them are staged a little differently and some of them are staged identically. It's interesting to watch them side by side or back to back, whatever, and just kind of see how some of the choices were made. And we'll get into this, I guess, but to me there was one version that was clearly better than the other one. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I think the version that aired is much better.
I agree. Yeah. Okay.
And maybe because I had already seen it, but they're definitely, and it comes down to the actors. I think that they're just better together, and we'll get into that more. And I think more suited maybe to the roles in different ways. I think Kim Cattrall is fine.
She definitely plays it differently. I mean, both of them. It's one thing that I think that the one single takeout I would have from this takeaway I would have from this is just how important your casting is. It sounds obvious, but here you see a very stark example of how changing the leads changes the whole tenor of the show.
Yeah, and even though the writing's almost identical,
Right.
with the exception of like a couple jokes or something. But
I mean, you don't always get that luxury, right? I mean, you might think of like notoriously like Mickey Rooney is Archie Bunker, right? That was supposedly he was considered or wanted to play the Carol O'Connor role.
Edith.
Yeah, but you can only like speculate, or like Art Hindle as Magnum PI. But now we actually get a chance to see how these things might have played out. You can actually, and it's rare that you have that opportunity. So I think it's kind of cool, and that is the most interesting thing about this to me.
Yeah, I think just because of knowing who the actors are, it's a little interesting to me that it seems like in the Kim Cattrall version, in terms of costuming and some other things, they're almost playing down her being sexy.
Interesting.
Like she's she's in like Stevie Nicks in the 70s kind of costumes.
Wow. Okay, that's good. Yeah.
And Catherine Hicks, who we associate with playing a mom in Seventh Heaven,
And a wholesome family drama.
a wholesome family drama with a lot of unwholesome behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But she's almost like her, not that she's like walking around in a bikini or anything, but she's wearing skirts and like you can see her legs most of the time, and I think she just I don't know. There's something in the chemistry there too that like it seems more amped up, and not in a bad way, like in a just like this is a married couple that's really hot for each other.
It was more overtly physical, like the chemistry between the two of them. I think Kim Cattrall, I think her version is more wide-eyed and innocent. Like almost literally wide-eyed. Like a lot of her, like some of her line readings, I mean, and just like, she kind of has like just the way she's saying things, and she's like, ooh, like thinking over, and there's just sort of more of an innocence to her. Whereas Catherine Hicks seems a little bit more mature, a little bit more, not jaded maybe is the wrong word, but just a little bit more experienced and seasoned maybe.
Yeah,
whereas
and she wants to prove herself in a different way.
Yeah.
Like she just wants to get better at this thing.
Right.
Whereas, the Kim Cattrall's, I think it's her performance, but I really do. I mean, her face looks very young.
Yeah.
Like early 20s.
Right.
And Art Hindle, I don't know how old he was, but he looks like too old for her sometimes.
He looks a little bit more rugged. Yeah, I agree. There's more of a difference between them, whereas Matheson and Hicks just seem like she seems like more of a young woman. Art seems a little bit older. Matheson and Hicks just seem like more of a mature couple that have been doing this longer. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's all true, and I think that's an interesting note on the costuming, and I don't know, it's interesting. I wonder if that had anything to do with the direction that CBS did, because if I mean the way we're putting it now almost makes it seem like, well, I don't want to say justifies the decision, but almost explains that a little bit more. Like, I don't know if they were self-conscious or if they were consciously hoping for a character that was more naive or younger seeming, but I still think it sounds a little ridiculous. Yeah. But if that's why they were doing it, as opposed to just, oh, well, she was in an R-rated movie, well, then maybe it makes a little bit more sense. But I don't think we didn't read anything or hear anything that indicates that that's why they did it, that they were that deep into the creative aspects of it, that they thought, like, oh, this character should be a little bit more seasoned, should play a little bit more mature, a little bit more sexual, but in I don't know. It just seems weird.
Right. It seems like they're almost afraid of Kim Cattrall's sexuality. Yeah. And despite like they were hiding it, and I mean, just because she is a beautiful woman, and in more, well, I don't know, in a different, in like maybe more standard ways in a way, but not. I mean, she's kind of tall, or she seems that way to me.
Well, it's interesting if you think about it. Again, this is another kind of counterfactual or maybe hypothetical. If you were watching the show back then, and you saw both of these, who do you think would be, like 15 years later, who do you think would be in a show called Sex and the City? More likely Kim Cattrall. If you took Porky's out of it and just looked at these performances, I would think Catherine Hicks would be more likely to be in that. And I'm not saying that I would see Kim Cattrall as the mother on a show like Seventh Heaven, but if you just looked at those roles based on kind of the things we've been talking about, I would be surprised that Kim Cattrall would be in that show.
And yet, I could imagine Kim Cattrall playing Jessica Biel's mother, that they have enough physical similarities.
Ah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Kind of their build and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, it's all. It's hard to like separate what we know.
Yeah. Another topic for our What If TV podcast. We've got the Art Hindle saga, and then Kim Cattrall and Catherine Hicks changing lanes and having having each other's careers.
Parallel universes.
Yes.
Yeah. But then I imagine that Catherine Hicks is more of I don't know, whatever. I'm forgetting their names. She's more of the Sarah Jessica Parker type.
Like the Samantha, I think, was Kim Cattrall, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she doesn't strike me as a Samantha. But
yeah, no.
The writing might have been different for her.
True.
So, yeah, I guess we should.
Yeah, maybe we should get into it. And we haven't even talked about, we've mentioned a name that is very prominent in this, but we haven't even talked about maybe the most fascinating thing about this, right, is the villain is the same in both versions.
That's right, Mr. Ted Danson.
Yes. And
this aired, a week after the first episode of Cheers aired?
A week after or before? One of the,
Yeah, right in the same...
Yeah. How wild is that?
Yeah. And, he's not Leonard Nimoy in Columbo, but he does a pretty good job of being it.
Yeah, he'd been in commercials, he'd been in, I guess, Body Heat, so it wasn't totally like, they were taking like a totally clean-cut, wholesome guy and turning him into Sam Malone.
He'd been on Magnum PI.
Ah, good point, yes. But it is jarring to see him in this, especially when you watch this essentially the same story twice. Yeah. Because he's playing a serial killer.
Yeah. And they give him a dumb motive at the end, but
yeah,
he's really just, he's a serial killer.
Yeah, very menacing. And now here's one thing that I want to say, because I think it's important too, is I found him much more menacing in the aired version of the pilot. In the unaired version, I found him more as like, not necessarily a schlub, but more of kind of like, it seemed like they were he was more playing it as like an average guy that was that was mentally disturbed. Whereas in the second one, it almost seems like there's nothing redeeming about the guy, and it seemed like they played up the evil aspects of it a little bit more. There was just little things in the performance. Now, maybe I was straining, but there's a couple scenes that were shot differently. But I just found him much more sinister in the second version, and I also think part of it was too like it was generally more suspenseful in the aired version, and like there's a chase scene that I thought was just filmed a little bit more dramatically in the second version. So yeah, he's creepy in both. But I found him more evil in the second one, or the aired one, I should say.
Okay, I'll buy it.
Okay.
I know there was like one shot where he seemed very Sam Malone.
Oh, really?
Where he's sitting on the couch with Catherine Hicks.
Ah, yeah.
It's just the way he was reclining, and it's just everything about it. And because he was kind of flirting with her.
Right.
And Sammy. But Sammy, of course, would not strangle women with pantyhose.
To me, he came off kind of more of as like a little bit more sleazy and more like a guy in the make with Kim Cattrall. But then the version with Catherine Hicks, there just seems something more bad about him from the get-go. All
right. Other regular cast members, there's Alfre Woodard, who's in all the episodes I've seen is wasted.
Yeah.
I mean, she's their assistant at their detective agency.
Yeah, I don't think we've mentioned really the premise of it.
No. Yeah, so they're detectives, and then there's another bit that we'll get to in just a second. And then, what's the cops?
Bill Morey,
I don't know him, but... And he shows up in some episodes and not in others. And
he's just the kind of guy you look at and he's kind of older to begin with, but he just looks like the kind of guy that's been around a while.
Yeah. But he's not like, I like that he's sort of like, he kind of likes these guys.
He's a little more avuncular than you might think, right?
Yeah.
He's not quite as crusty to them. He's got a fondness, and he indulges them a little bit more than you might expect.
Right. Like, I don't know, they're his grandkids.
His grandkids.
And then Barbara Barry plays her, Catherine Hicks's mother, who lives with them.
Amanda
mother.
Tucker's the female character.
Yes.
Correct. Yes, and Rick.
Ellen, yes, and Rick.
No relation to me.
No, Rick Tucker. Boy, that's a good TV name.
Rick Tucker.
Yeah. Man of action.
Yeah.
and Ellen is the mother's name.
Yeah, Barbara Barry. Well, I guess we'll get into it. I never, she's still with us. Nothing against the woman, but I never liked her as a performer. She irritated me, like in everything I saw her when I was growing up.
So, and she was Barney Miller's wife.
Yeah. And I can't say for sure that I was a kid and was annoyed about the domestic scenes of Barney Miller. But the one thing I remember that I really didn't care for a character was remember the show Double Trouble with the two twins?
Yeah.
And they showed reruns of that on USA, I think, all the time. And I think she was their aunt or aunt, if you will. And by either name, that character just annoyed me. And I can't put my finger on it, but I was never a fan of that performer. Now here she's doing a different characterization than maybe we've seen her in other roles.
So the sort of flaky thing is not her normal.
I would say no. I mean, and I think she's very capable and she's had an incredible career. But yeah, I was a little expected, or maybe I was expecting to see her play more of like a cynical, savvy person. But instead of her being like a contentious mother-in-law, having a contentious relationship with Rick, it's more like they kind of look out for her, and they kind of have to take care of her. And she's much more vulnerable in this than I would have expected.
Yeah, he does in some episodes get a little annoyed with her. I mean, I guess he did in the unaired version. He's a little more put out with her about not calling the plumber. But
yeah,
the Art Hindle characterization in general, it seems annoyed with everything.
Yeah. It definitely it seems like they would have had to go a different direction. Well, I don't know if I want to get into this yet, but the show it reminds me of is Bewitched.
Yeah.
And his characterization is Art Hindle's a little bit more Darren, which always kind of annoyed me because I thought the Darren character, no matter who was playing him, was an idiot. Because, he's married to somebody that can do great things for him, and yet he just goes around, all grumpy and trying to stamp out what makes her her.
He wants her to wash the dishes with her hands, not
right.
Wiggle of her nose.
Exactly, yeah. And this one, Art Hindle seems a little bit more rough around the edges, and Tim Matheson seems like a little bit more like roll with the punches kind of guy. And
yeah, like he's concerned. So Amanda is, they call her a witch. I don't really think she's not casting spells, and she's a psychic of some kind and has some telekinetic abilities.
Yes.
And can psychically communicate with her cat Dickens. And it seems to be some sort of genetic thing that skips a generation. Mm-hmm. But there's another episode I watched that was pretty good where the killer is also a psychic.
Oh, that's interesting.
And he's like, I mean, he's like a public psychic, celebrity psychic, but he is psychic. And he's more experienced than she is. And he's sort of using his knowledge of having done the crime, but also some of his abilities to kind of misdirect them and point away from himself. So, that tiny bit of world building, which they don't really have a lot of, it suggests that it's more just an ability and not
a lifestyle.
Magic. Yeah, or a lifestyle, yeah.
Right. You don't have like relatives coming by and visiting and they're like being this whole like other world that she can dip in and out
like
of.
on Bewitched, there's like literally another dimension or something, right?
Yeah.
And even, Sabrina, I think, has any versions of Sabrina have stuff like that too.
Right. And a couple of the other episodes I watched, I don't want to say they downplay the witch elements, but they're there sort of as spice.
Yeah,
but not by any means the central part of what's driving the stories.
And that to me is like one of the things that maybe doesn't work about the show is that they don't commit to that. Like it is like you said, spice, or it's just it's an added little way for them to get clues, but it's not, you could do the same show and just have it'd be a married couple who's detectives and it wouldn't be that different.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that seems the structure of every episode I've seen is them at the end kind of coming to the solution from two different angles and kind of hitting it at the same time. And sometimes, like in this one, it involves someone being in peril, but he's using whatever skills he has and she's using those skills. But I mean, she could have other investigative skills and it could still work. Like the gimmick is not enough of a gimmick, I guess.
I think that's a good point. I think there's one, is it in the pilot or maybe another episode where somebody that is looking to hire them says something about her, makes reference to her abilities or something like that.
In the pilot.
Yeah, and
so
he kind of
people
downplays
know, and she downplays it too. It's like people sort of know she has this reputation.
Right.
And that the Fisk, the cop, he seems to know.
Right.
Maybe he doesn't. Maybe it's like Han Solo and Jedi. He's like, well, okay, whatever. You say you're psychic.
Right. It's almost like he'll take it if it works. Like, why turn it down if it leads to something? But he's not going to count on it, maybe.
Right. He's not going to be a total non-believer, but he probably doesn't really believe.
But Rick, I mean, that's one thing. Like, Rick seems, not to mind, but he seems more determined to just do things the old-fashioned way and put the work in. And he doesn't want to be thought of as a psychic detective agency. He wants to be thought of as just two detectives. And, like, you're hiring us, we're going to do the job, and we're just going to look for leads and do the investigative work. We're not going to, have my wife just sit there and concentrate real hard for 10 minutes and come up with clues.
Right, or talk to the cat.
Yeah. But the tone of the show, it's not the supernatural aspects. It's almost like, it's like a little hook for it, but really the tone is it's more kind of like what, a Scarecrow and Mrs. King, or like Remington Steele. I mean...
It's in that ballpark and Heart to Heart.
Yeah.
But it's not... Yeah, I guess it's hard to pinpoint, too, because it's not quite... It's not like a cozy mystery thing. And that the crimes, to me, are more like in line with Columbo or something. That they're, there's a serial killer. And that there's some pretty dark stuff in terms of the crimes, but the overall tone is sort of a light comedy tone.
Right. And the action element of it, in the sense that the Tuckers seem to be like threatened directly by the criminals in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So they're not really detached from it. They actually get right into it. And I guess a lot of it is taking on cases that are active and not, like solving a crime of passion where the killer is just trying to get away with it and not necessarily interested in killing other people.
Right. I guess that makes the psychic part work a little bit, that there are these crimes that they're almost trying to prevent the next crime.
There's more urgency.
Yeah.
Well, the original pilot was called The Good Witch of Laurel Canyon. Right, and then they renamed it to Tucker's Witch when it aired, which it seems odd. That in itself is an interesting choice. Tucker's Witch seems like an awkward title, don't you think so?
I mean, I think they're both awkward titles.
Yeah.
Like for a TV show,
yeah.
The Good Witch of Laurel Canyon, which is the name of the episode then when it aired, it does tell you things if you know what Laurel Canyon is, but
I think it's a good episode title.
Place in L.A. and it's sort of where, in the 60s and 70s, it was sort of like where the kind of hippie musicians lived. And I guess, and the mom at least seems a little bit like a hippie.
Yeah.
But then she's sort of taken aback by a marijuana joke. So
right. And you'll have like hills.
And
like, it kind of plays into it in the show, right? Where you've got to take advantage of the topography of the area, I guess.
Yeah.
And have a scene where you're you've got like a car careening out of control because the brakes have been...
Right. I mean, they're all over LA, though.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know what a good title would have been.
Yeah. Well, Tucker's Witch is weird because it's almost like Tucker, in that case, you'd think, well, Tucker is Rick, but she's a Tucker too.
True. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's...
This show had some conceptual issues. I think we're...
I enjoy the opening credits sequence is pretty good, especially in the aired version, I think.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, the music is just kind of lazy. I don't know.
It does seem more
music.
like a cozy mystery theme song.
Yeah.
The music seems a little bit more like it's more whimsical.
But yet just a little bit slinky, maybe. Maybe that's because... So in the credits, a lot of it is the cat, like, kind of walking around on the letters of the title. And then the various shots of the actors and all that.
I think that's another indication that they were aspiring to a certain sophistication that they didn't quite achieve. Now maybe they would have gotten there eventually, but in what I've seen, they didn't quite achieve it. I've seen maybe only a couple of episodes, but I think the aired version of the pilot is by far the best one I've seen. I liked it much better than the other ones I happen to see.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think that shows potential that I didn't quite see in the other episodes I saw.
And maybe I've seen 6 or 7, and honestly, a few of them I've forgotten what happened already. Mm-hmm. I watched a couple more this week, and those have stuck with me so far. But yeah, I think maybe the story element is not the strongest part. The strongest part is the two leads.
Right, which, tells you right there why the original version wouldn't have had a chance, probably.
Sorry, Art Hindle.
Yeah. If the other one wasn't going to make it, then I don't think that one would have made it for sure.
Yeah. So this one opens with, both versions, of course, open with Ted Danson strangling a woman, not a child.
Yeah.
If you can hear the screaming child down the hall. In like a building that's under construction in the elevator. Mm-hmm. And then you get the opening credits, and, it is jarring to see Ted Danson doing that. And then we meet the Tuckers. And it's morning, and Rick is waking up. I think in the unaired pilot, he's got a hangover. In the aired one, he's got indigestion from lasagna. I don't know why they changed that.
Yeah. That seems to be an odd thing to tinker with, but...
And one of the differences already, besides that, is that, and this is pretty consistent from throughout the series, Tim Matheson's version doesn't wear a shirt when he sleeps.
Well, hey, if you get Tim Matheson for your show, you're paying for a certain Tim Matheson, you know what I'm saying?
And Art Hindle, he's got a full set of pajamas.
Right.
And you can see some of his belly because they're all messed up because I guess he buttoned it wrong or something.
Yeah, that's effects of the hangover, I guess.
Amanda's on the floor, like writing in a notebook, and she had a dream about the strangler and these killings that have been going on around town, and she thinks it's going to... And she has a little psychic talk with Dickens about that, too. He or she, I don't know. It changes depending on who's talking about the cat. But, says there's been a fourth one, and they're going to get involved. Rick doesn't really believe it.
Yeah, no, because we don't hear Dickens actually talking. Unfortunately, as much as I would love to hear, like, Nick Buckeye voice Dickens like he did Sabrina's cat Salem, Amanda has to interpret as to pass along that information to us, the viewer, and to Rick.
Yeah. So whenever there's a cat conversation, it involves her holding Dickens and staring in his face, and then usually a close-up of this cat, which is a beautiful cat, and with these really blue eyes.
Yeah, may I point out here, because there's some people in my household that would not let me hear the end of it if I didn't mention that Dickens is played by a cat named Hubie, and this is the only credit, I think, the only screen credit for Hubie, who did fine work in here, but that's according to a website called Cinema Cats, which was quoting the Encyclopedia of Television Pets.
Wow.
And let me give a shout out to our crack research team for coming up with that information, but I couldn't find any more information on Hubie, unfortunately, who played Dickens.
Maybe Hubie belonged to the same people who owned Run Joe Run. What was his name?
Oh, Curtis von Hoffenpuffer or something?
Something like...
Something majestic.
Anton of St. Clair.
Yes,
something like that.
Something of... Yes, Heinrich of Midvale.
Yes, Heinrich of Midvale.
I knew we'd get it eventually. So you...
They specialize in one-shot wonder animals.
Yeah, okay. I kind of like that interpretation because my first reaction was like, what a terrible... I thought Hubie had a terrible agent because Hubie didn't get screen credit.
Yeah.
Like we were hoping to see and Dickens as himself. And Hubie as Dickens.
Yeah.
But no screen credit.
Well,
that's maybe why I didn't get any more roles after Tucker's Witch.
yeah, like give me that cat, and nobody knew.
Yeah. Well, there's a rumor that I'm hesitant to report this, but there's a story that the original cat they had was in a racy scene in That Darn Cat. Or no, maybe it was The Cat from Outer Space, one of those movies, and that CBS demanded that the original cat be pulled and replaced with Hubie, who had a spotless record. All of his shots, too, and vaccinations, I'm told.
Oh, good. Yeah. So they make a little bet, which is a running thing. $5 that this is going to come true. And she's also been thinking about the name Frank. And then they're having breakfast and reading the paper. There's nothing in the paper about another killing. And we meet the mom. She comes in. She sells herbs or something. She has some business involving herbs and teas, and she grows in the yard.
And if you're thinking of something, yes, they address it on the show. They make that joke.
Yeah.
They beat you to it, folks, so we won't get into that.
And then they get a call, right? Mm-hmm. From Marsha.
Alfred Woodard's character, yeah.
And there's someone waiting in the office to talk to them, the sister of one of the victims. And so Amanda wins a bet. There are a couple bets, though.
Yeah, it's
going to be Marsha. And I think they bet about that. And then I forget how they find out about the fourth victim, but they do. So they go to the office and they talk to this woman who's like, sure, the ex-husband, Frank, did it. Mm-hmm. And that woman, did they change actors there too, or did she just have a different hairdo the second time?
You know what? I don't know offhand. I didn't look at that because there was somebody in another scene that actually had a different hairstyle. Either way, I don't know for sure.
Yeah,
I'm not going to speculate. You know, in this podcast, we don't get into wild speculations.
Right.
So I can't say.
But they follow up his lead and they go and talk to Frank, who's working on a high rise. So that is suspicious. I think because they already know these killings have taken place.
There's a pattern, yeah, in high rises.
And he's like on I don't know, he's a mason or something, but on sort of like a window washing platform. I feel bad for that actor, like, because it looks like they really shot it up there.
Yeah,
it's not like that soap, construction site,
right?
And there are enough shots where they're all in the shots where clearly he had to go up there twice to do this dumb scene.
Maybe that was something on his resume. Not afraid of heights. Can do convincing masonry. So since he's a Mason, would you say he'd be identified as Mason?
Frank. He's a Frank. His name is Francis, but his name is Fences, but people call him Frank. So they find it because the sister said, that he beat the woman who died, beat his wife, and she's like, no, he only hit her once.
That doesn't make him a murderer, he says.
Right, yeah. Or, yeah. And he is making a semantic.
Right,
he didn't do it all the time.
Right. And it's funny because, like, it's not played for comedy at all, but you kind of see, like, the Tuckers kind of, like, processing him saying that. And I think I was kind of watching, I just remember watching Tim Matheson's face and seeing how he processed that. And he wasn't kind of, like, accepting it, but he was like, okay. You could tell he was, like, thinking about, like, well, it doesn't make him a murderer, but it was just kind of weird. I mean, but it's almost like, well, why would he's I think the point is that the guy comes off as honest. He's got issues. He's showing his anger issues, and you can tell he probably would kill the guy that she was with, if anything, right? But
yeah, and I think in the unaired version, there's something about her being unfaithful, and that's not in.
Okay, I'm maybe mixing up the versions.
Yeah, that's not in the aired version.
In one of the versions, it's very explicit. He says something like she was running around with somebody, and
yeah,
boy, I'd like to get a hold of that guy.
And like Amanda intuits that he has some item that's hers, and it turns out it's on his keychain. And I think in the unaired one, he says it's not connected to that infidelity. Whereas this, he's like, I don't know what that is.
Right.
But she takes it, and it's like a heart with a square, or really it's like a TV shape inside the heart.
Oh, yeah.
I think in the unaired one, it's just like a D, the letter D and M.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Which is, I like that they changed it because it becomes an important clue. And
right.
It seems like tracking it down the way it is in the aired version makes more sense.
That's a good point, yeah.
And then they go from there to the crime scene of the latest victim. They talk to Fisk and find out that victim had the same keychain. And in both, I like this, he has like a bag of peanuts, and he shares them.
While they're doing a walk and talk.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm fascinated, but I think in the unaired one, Kim Cattrall just reaches in the bag. Like, he doesn't offer it. She just reaches in, but then she's doing business with that the whole time, and I like that.
Okay, yeah.
in the aired one, he offers it, but then Amanda takes some, but as they're walking, she hands some to Rick, and he's like tossing them in his mouth and stuff. And I'm like, see, they're Art Hindle, he's not into doing business.
No.
Tim Matheson, yeah.
Tim Matheson can do it. It's like Michael J. Fox and to orange juice is to Tim Matheson to peanuts.
Exactly. Yeah, give me something to...
Yeah.
And of course, that, now I'm thinking about it, Sam Malone did that a lot.
He did, didn't he? Yeah. The beer nuts at the bar, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, though, because it establishes the comfort level that these three characters have with each other.
Yeah. There's, again, he just seems to, maybe not grandfatherly, but he has maybe a mentor.
Right.
Sort of, he has an affection for them for some reason.
And also, when Amanda asked to see the item that was found, now this is kind of like interesting, is that like he says, he gives it to her, he's like, oh, how'd you know about that? And she says, oh, you mentioned it, like, or one of your men mentioned it before. She doesn't say like, well, because I've got, witch powers.
Right. But he knows.
Does he though?
Well,
or does he like kind of see it as...
He's like, the next time, he says something about like, the next time you get one of your...
That's true.
Ideas, don't tell us it's at the bottom of the La Brea tar pit again.
Yeah. I got the impression that he was playing it as if that he didn't really believe it, but he's sort of indulging them. But now that I think about it, yeah, if the reputation's out there, then he must know, he must have to address it. But I wonder why she doesn't just say... Yeah,
I think she wants to downplay it.
Okay.
I guess. Because they did the same with the Frank guy she was having.
Yeah.
And he was, Rick was even kind of giving her looks like, what are you...
Yeah.
Or just like, she's...
Okay.
Got an instinct.
Yeah. I'm kind of overanalyzing it because, we watched this and we watched two versions of the same story, but this is the kind of thing that you would think that they would have straightened out if the show had lasted as they went on. They would define this a little bit more clearly.
Yeah.
I'll bet, as a matter of fact, probably like if they got like a second season, eventually they'd get to a point where Fisk would be like actively calling her in once she establishes herself and going to her as a primary on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like actually taking cases to her and running them by her to see if she's got any vibes or something.
Right. And of course, if they were making it now, by the time they got to the second or third season, almost every single character would have some sort of power.
You're right.
Yes. Rick would be a werewolf and just...
There'd be like a cousin of hers would come in, like a teenage cousin that would be, have powers too and would be living with them. This is maybe another reason why Art Hindle bailed on this. He's like, you know what? Eventually they're going to do this and then they're going to do a reboot, 20 years from now. And I don't want my name on that.
Yeah. Art Hindle's got better things to do.
He does.
That's how that's on the record. That's how he quit. He said, Art Hindle's got better things to do.
He just walked out.
Yeah.
He's got plenty better roles to turn down.
But I'm going to take this sweater under this tweed coat over this shirt because it's a good look.
Yeah.
Boy, Art Hindle's... He's getting a lot of play on this for us not...
He really is, considering he wasn't even the star of the show.
No.
And we talked about how much better Tim Matheson was in the role. Cult hero Art Hindle.
So later they're at home, and Rick has a map up of all the buildings and, and the murder sites, the crime scenes, and, they can't really find a pattern other than these new buildings. Mm-hmm. And then Marcia shows up, and she's done some digging on Rick's behest into this logo on this keychain, and it turns out it belongs to a dating service called Data Match.
Yeah, video dating.
I mean, that's a connection, and that's a good clue, and there's a good combination of the psychic part and the legwork.
Right.
Of course, Rick didn't do the legwork himself, but
no,
he's busy putting thumbtacks in a map.
Yeah.
He's got other things to do there. So they decide they're going to go down to Data Match, and they're sitting outside and debating who's going to go in and, pretend to be a client. And Rick seems a little overprotective and wanting, well, if the killer's in there, I don't want to get you, And Amanda's very gung-ho. I mean, that's sort of the tension of the episode, I think, right? That a lot of it is that she's wanting to prove herself and get more involved in things.
Yeah, and he's trying to kind of put the governor on it a little bit and hold her back a bit.
Right, and again...
field work.
The difference in how they play it, or how it plays out, like in the Hindle Cattrall version. Yeah, she seems like an eager young person, and he seems almost like...
It's almost more paternal.
Yeah, paternal. I was going to say smug, but that's not the word. But
yeah,
like condescending.
Well, condescending, yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's fair.
And in the Matheson Hicks version, it's just more concern.
It's so much easier to believe them as a real couple for whatever reason that Matheson's concern comes off a little bit better than Hindle's does.
Yeah. Yeah, Hindle just, I don't know. He seems to have condescending is the best word I can think of. And also, it's just his look somehow that looks condescending.
You just don't like the cut of his jib.
I guess not. And she says they should flip. She chooses tails, it comes up heads, but then she uses her little powers to make it flip over. Which, by the way, whenever she does a telekinetic thing, there's a sound effect that I absolutely just hate.
Yeah, I can't even begin to reproduce it.
I mean, I think it's like, maybe they're like tuning a piano string.
Yeah.
It's some sort of stringed instrument, and they're either turning the pitch up or down, and it's just
when I was
really irritating.
It happens again and again, and I was wondering, like, was this something that, like, did they use this kind of noise in the Doctor Strange movie? You know, but it's like, no, I don't think it was quite that.
I believe in the Doctor Strange movie, it was boing.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
This
is more twangy, a little bit more grating, yes. And everything else like comes to a stop a lot of times, and they'll like focus on something and it really kind of emphasizes it more.
Yeah, and she usually stares really hard, maybe arches an eyebrow, so we know that's what she's doing.
Yeah,
a cheap way to get it across, though.
Yeah,
effective. It's just annoying. So then they decide, she's like, we'll both go, and I'll let you go first. So Rick goes in, and then we get the whole poor Ted Danson having to twice, this is worse than being up on that high rise, explain this whole convoluted dating service.
Right.
This high tech.
I
mean, it's essentially like, I guess it's doing what these online dating services, the software does now. So someone films a profile and they put it on videotape. They have a library of the videotapes. People can come in and watch those videos in their viewing booths. And if they like someone, they let the management know. The management contacts the person who's interested, who can then come in and watch the other person's tape. And if they're interested, then they make a connection and go out on a date.
Right. And yeah, it's sort of similar to the way you're right. I mean, there's sort of like that intermediary aspect of it, which totally gets blown out of the water when people are actually in the office and Ted Danson's character is actually introducing people to each other,
right,
and kind of taking away presumably there's like a layer of protection because you're going through the service, and also it helps the service make money, I guess, instead of like having people just directly contact each other. But
yeah,
it's kind of weird.
And you're not allowed to take tapes home.
That's
Makes
a no-no,
sense.
yeah.
And he's also, for some reason, he's like shows him the office.
Yeah, he gives him a tour.
Yeah, and like there's a whole cabinet of terminated tapes, which is people who just dropped out or stopped, I guess, paying or whatever.
Or like if they get married or something, they give them the tapes eventually or something like that.
Right, yeah, or, murdered.
Yeah. What'd you say? Oh, did I say murdered?
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Strangled with panty. I mean,
yeah.
No. And the way Tim Matheson plays all of this, he's like just super exuberant.
Yeah.
Like that's his undercover work, is to be like, hey, gee,
yeah,
and making sort of lame jokes, like,
right, and
laughing at his own jokes and stuff.
And
kind of it seems like Danny, Ted Danson's character, really doesn't like him. Like he doesn't laugh at any of these jokes or anything. He's just like, fiction. Like Rick, the character that Rick is playing, assumes this, just guys being guys. This guy thinks I'm funny, and he doesn't really respond at all.
That's true. That's interesting. I didn't quite pick up on that as much as you did, I don't think, because I was kind of focusing on later, and maybe it was kind of more of an act, but I saw later some of like on the surface gestures Danny's making are kind of more like, hey, being a bro's like, hey, I think you did it again, or I think you did it, Rick, and all this, and like kind of like
that,
almost like congratulating him, slapping on the back, but that could easily be just like making him feel good and just kind of telling the customer what he wants to hear.
Yeah, and then as soon as he goes,
losers.
Yeah.
But video dating was kind of like a big thing for a while, and there's definitely other TV shows that have done that kind of gimmick.
Yes, video dating and some whatever the version of computer dating was back then.
Yeah.
We feed this card into that machine.
And it's kind of like almost like one thing we were talking about when we watched it. Like, there's almost kind of like a narcissism too, like involved with video, because you're putting a profile out there and it's structured like an interview, but you're kind of talking about yourself and putting this persona out of yourself,
Right. Although, I mean, I guess in a way it's better than putting a fake photograph up.
True.
Or a misleading photograph.
Yeah, and in the one quote unquote civilian that we see on a date later in the episode, her video seems to be like she's putting out a character, but then we see she really is that person.
Yeah.
To
Maybe
be fair.
more so.
Yeah.
And then I've seen what I call in my notes hot tub action.
Yeah.
Where they're hanging out in their hot tub, which is like built into the yard somehow.
Yeah, it's almost like there must be a grotto back there or something.
That's
right?
what it looks like, yeah. And clearly they're unclothed.
Yeah.
And they're just talking about the case and working some things out. And they kind of put together, well, okay, they need to get those tapes from the terminated shelf. But clearly, too, like the whole thing, whole scene, it's like a turn on, too.
Yeah.
But they don't really do much because their neighbor on a hill is watching them through a telescope.
Yeah, the peepers, they refer to him.
The peeper, but I mean, they know where he lives, and it seems like they could do something about that.
Yeah. Do you now? You've seen some. I don't remember the peepers showing up again.
I don't think so. I don't think the hot tub shows up again.
Oh, really? Okay. Because
maybe it. I don't remember.
It totally plays like something that would have been a thing, right? That they were
Right.
establishing, like, okay, they're going to have this is going to be where they're going to go over the details, and there's this wacky peeper character that they're going to have like little ways of punishing him, but without actually like doing anything about it.
Yeah. In this case, Amanda makes his telescope pivot and hit him and knock him into his pool.
Of course, yeah, he's going to go backwards into his own pool. But they're like, oh, well, the peeper's at it again.
That part's weird, but it's an interesting scene. And again, there is this vibe of this couple being really into each other.
Yeah, it's not filmed provocatively, but it's there. It's like you said, they're unclothed, they're in the hot tub, and something they threw in there. But it's not. I mean, it's not particularly revealing, but just the setting itself suggests something for sure.
And then the next day, they go back in to the dating service, and it's Amanda's turn, and she pretends she can't see the application well, and she gets Danny to help her so she can distract him, basically. And Rick has a briefcase with him that Danny has to pick up and hand to him. So Rick goes back because he's already got 3 interested parties. And he's watching the videos, and then while she's distracting Danny, he breaks into the office and steals these tapes. But then before he's out, they're done with the application, and he's going to give Amanda the tour, and so she has to use her power to knock a vase off a shelf. Mm-hmm. And Rick gets out in time, but then I guess a mistake, he leaves the briefcase on the floor, and Danny picks it up and knows that he's taken some tapes, which is a common occurrence.
Right. He mentions to the coworker, apparently the one other worker in the office. Oh, there's 2?
Yeah, there's a blonde.
Oh, that's right. There's the receptionist
and the assistant,
and then who films the profiles. Yes, he says like that suitcase was empty when he brought it in, and now then it wasn't.
Yeah.
Now I want to highlight this scene because this scene was shot much differently, and I thought it was much better done. It was only it was a very short segment, but I think in the Unaired version, it's rushed. The angle's different. You sort of, it seems more casual. It's almost like behind Ted Danson and and the woman he's talking to. Whereas they emphasize a little bit more in the second one. It seemed like it's just paced just a little bit better, enough to think like, okay, kind of emphasize the fact that he realizes what's going on now, and he's angry about it. Not just that he realizes what's going on, but just that he's angry about it. And that helped me see what happens next with him a little bit differently. It didn't seem like, again, I would say he seems more desperate in the Unaired version, whereas in the other one, it's like, it's not so much desperation, it's like a cold, calculated, like, okay, I got to do something about this.
Okay.
And it's just a little moment that I would recommend, although you've probably seen enough Tucker's Witch by now. But if anybody, is watching it, I'd compare those 2 scenes, because those are 2 scenes. I think the writing is almost identical, but it's shot much differently.
What I noticed in that version is that he was just doing some very Ted Danson-y things too. Like they were by this bulletin board that had like index cards and thumbtacks, and he was just playing with the tacks and things. And
yeah, that's good.
I just enjoyed that.
That's right.
But then he goes and looks. First, he looks in the booth, and all the tapes are there, and it dawns on him that maybe he was in the office, and he goes in the office, and sure enough, the 4 tapes of the victims are gone. And Rick had used their work address as his address for the dating thing. So, which I didn't catch in the Unaired one, and then it's one of the things they mentioned when they're in the hot tub. I guess I was distracted by people by Art Hindle in it.
Of course.
In the hot tub.
Maybe somebody should have made your telescope spin around and knock you back into your pool.
Maybe.
No, we're allowed to watch. We're the viewer.
We're the
It's not weird of us to be watching.
That's right. I'm paying whatever I'm paying a year to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Goes and he sees Rick come out of the office, and he knows, this guy's a detective. They're on to me. he's on to me. He doesn't know anything about Amanda yet, but he's definitely not hip to Rick. And then Rick's going out on a date with Babs, to keep his cover.
Yeah. Maybe he can get some more information.
Oh yeah, that's right. Maybe
she might have met
a rough customer.
Yeah, because she's been on, I forget how they phrase it. Like, doesn't Danny said something like she's had a lot of
repeat?
Yeah, which is that a good thing? In this circumstance, or like friend of the show, Lori, said something like to her, like this service looked more like a service for swingers rather than like to meet somebody, in a serious relationship. And certain kind of things that point to that. I think one of that, this is an example of kind of like, well, what are these people actually looking for? They're looking for a serious relationship or something more casual.
But maybe different people are different. Maybe Babs is like, she's a very straightforward person.
She is, yeah.
She's I'm looking for as much fun as I can have. So if people are coming back though, that means there's something like worthwhile there, right?
Yeah, and it's weird though. Like, how would people come back? I mean, they already would have her information, presumably.
You're right. Did they have to do that through the service?
Yeah. Although in one or both versions, I think she makes a reference to Danny keeping tabs on the girls.
Yeah.
Which is,
Yeah, that makes it sound like
something else. It does, doesn't it?
A service of a kind.
Right.
But before he goes on the date, there's a scene where Amanda's sort of jealous a little bit, and leads to a little bit of magic and a little bit of making out. And I don't know, was she telekinetically pulling him back, or was she putting a spell on?
It seemed like she was putting some kind of like love spell on him,
right?
Or like erotic spell, right?
Yeah, which doesn't seem necessary.
Like to pull him, yeah.
And he knew what was going on.
He's like, it's not going to work this time, no.
Yeah, but that's staged almost exactly the same both times.
Yeah.
And they end up like, in a doorway and stuff. But
like, I'm going to be real late. However,
lets him go.
Yeah.
And then he makes he's like, on second thought, don't wait up for me.
Yeah.
A little dig. Of course, he won't do anything.
Yeah.
And so he goes to meet Babs, who's, like we said, very straightforward, take charge. She's like, I made the date, so we're going in my car, and I made the reservations, and I'm paying. And if you make the date, you get to do all that.
Yeah, and she's just something like, and we go back to my place after the date.
That's right, yeah. So I guess she doesn't care how the date goes.
No.
And Rick is all, well, okay.
Yeah.
Playing his character, And as they're leaving, we see Danny watching them, which was that in both?
I'm not so sure. I think it might have, I don't think it was in both versions.
It's good that it's in the final version because it makes something a little clearer once they're on the date. But and then he goes and breaks into the office, and somewhere in there too, there's like I thought a nice scene between Amanda and her mom about sort of
like them
the family
as witches,
and the powers and how that works. But it's just a nice character moment too. That
right,
you see, okay, her mom's a widow and didn't have these abilities, and maybe this situation where she's living with them is new. Mm-hmm. So everyone's still adjusting to that.
Right.
It's just a nice moment. I
Yeah.
thought. In both versions, I thought it worked. But when Danny breaks into the office, he finds, of course, Amanda's picture, and he ends up calling her and making a date with her. And she doesn't have any reason to be suspicious other than her cat immediately being worried.
Yeah. It was basically like, yeah, let's have a date like now, and I'll pick you up in 15 minutes.
Yeah. and Rick and Babs are driving down this curvy road, and her brakes go out. And she can't shift gears either. And then there's this wild sort of car scene that, honestly, I fast forwarded through the second time because it's pretty well played, but it was almost like too intense.
Yeah, it was intense. Yeah, Rick has to kind of like desperately try to get control of the wheel and just play defense.
Yeah. Then after they sort of come to a abrupt stop on the side of the road, he's like, who knew we were going out? And she's like, well, the two women who work there, and he's like, and then she says that line about, and Danny, of course, who keeps tabs. And so at that point, Rick knows that Danny's the killer. Meanwhile, Amanda's, of course, on this the date with him, and they're driving, and he's taking her someplace with a great view, and she gets suspicious. But there's something else that...
Yeah, she's like asking questions about it, like, oh, where are we going? Like, oh, you'll love it. It's a new high-rise. It's a high-rise. I think he uses the phrase high-rise, like a new... Because he's doing like ones that are newly constructed, and that's like a key part of it too. They're new buildings because they're not as highly populated, so it's easier for him to have time enough to strangle somebody.
Right, and not have witnesses.
Yeah, So he's not being specific. He's being kind of weird. He's brushing it off and just saying it, and which kind of makes her even more suspicious, I guess, because he's being so vague about where they're going.
So she makes it look like they've run out of gas, but it also makes the car actually react like it's out of gas. Like I find that that didn't quite play.
A little creative license there, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So they pull over to a gas station, and she sneaks off and makes a phone call and has to leave a message on their answering machine because, of course, Rick's still recovering from this, but tells him what she thinks is going to happen and where the vicinity they are, and he should bring in the cavalry, which means the cops. So then she and Danny go to this building, and sure enough, Danny tries to kill her, and I guess that's the chase scene you were talking about, right, through the building.
It is, yeah, and it was interesting because I think in the first version, I thought the second version was shot a little bit better, but the first version was a little bit more realistic in the sense that there was like boards on some of the windows and stuff. Whereas in the second version, it looked more polished, like the building, it just maybe not quite as occupied.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the big visual differences. It looked more like it was actually like still being constructed, like the interior. Whereas the second one, it seemed a little maybe empty, but just it seemed more posh.
Yeah, I wonder if that, because it does seem like the same building, so maybe just it was a real building that was under construction and they're further along.
Could be.
But there's still like the thing, like at some point they get split up and they're in parallel kind of hallways. Like he's in an office and she's in the hall and he has to rip down plastic. And, that I think that's in both versions.
Yeah.
He's definitely in the second one, he's very menacing there.
Yeah. I think that's another shot that like stands out as being a little bit more menacing in the aired version.
And then as she tries to like hex him, and that doesn't do anything. And she did actually before that. She was able to control the elevator to get out. Like he kept part of his deal is he pushes the emergency stop to trap them between floors while he does his business, and she keeps unstopping it.
Yeah.
Which is a good use of that ability.
And there's a little dramatic tension in the fact that they've established that her powers don't always work.
Yeah.
So that adds to some tension that she can't just like hex her way out of every situation.
Right. And then like in the hallway when she tries, it doesn't do anything. So she just has to deck him.
Yeah, which is kind of funny.
It is, and I got to say that's one place where Kim Cattrall was more convincing.
Yeah,
and it just had to do with their physicality. But I think she's probably closer in size to Ted Danson, or height.
Yeah,
and they end up in a parking garage, and she's hiding. Meanwhile, at home, Rick has come home, and good old Dickens, played the answering machine message for him, and so he looked at his map and put everything together, and he's gone. And does show up in the nick of time, and he also punches Ted Danson.
Yeah, and now he shakes his hand like it, shows visible pain after hitting him.
Right, yeah. Which, that's good. I like that. I like it when a detective punches someone and it hurts.
Yeah.
I assume it does. I haven't really punched anyone.
It should. Now, did Art Hindle do that too?
I think he did.
I think both of them did. I have a more vivid memory of Tim Matheson doing it, but
even a simple gesture like that.
Yeah,
he puts a little more zest.
Yeah, well.
But the elevator doors close and they're going up, and Amanda manages to really use her powers and bring the elevator back down right as the cops arrive, and that's pretty much the case solved. And then there's an end scene where we find out again. I think this motive is kind of silly, but his wife cheated on him, and all these women he killed, or I guess like separated or had been married or whatever. And he was getting back at.
Yeah, it's one of those like necessary evils of a lot of these shows where, they have to kind of explain like why the motive and stuff. Yeah, so it seems that, and you're right, that part's a little silly, but it was kind of a necessary thing, I guess.
But, while they're talking about it, Rick's going on about it, but this seems like a good service. It's, just if you don't have a killer's working for it, then this and I like this. I didn't follow it quite as much in the original or the unaired one for some reason, but like while he's talking, Amanda's doing all this stuff, kind of preparing. Like she already knows what she's gonna do. And
yeah,
she like nods at Dickens and he leaves. And
yes, which that whole power to communicate to a pet and have them actually leave the room, something that I've wished many times that I had. I don't have that ability, unfortunately.
No, but and then she puts out. They have a fireplace. She like blinks and puts out the fire and puts out a candle, and and it's it's like this flirty thing where he's I think if I needed to and I use the service long enough, I could probably find the right person, and then she calls him over to her side of the bed and snaps her fingers or whatever, and fade to black, or not fade to black, but cut to black. And I'm pretty sure every episode ends pretty much that way.
With them like
about to do it,
going over the
going over the case, and then about to do it. Yeah.
Yes. Much like the chemistry between Mike and Carol Brady, they
Right.
establish it between Rick and Amanda Tucker with a little playful banter at the end of the night.
That's right, yeah. Even much like the chemistry between Jack Klugman and Fences.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I think it is noticeable that they seem to be wearing less clothing in the aired version.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more, they're pushing that part of it a little bit more blatantly, I think.
I think so. But again, I guess it's a show for adult couples.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
I mean, now, don't get us wrong. This is 1982 CBS,
Yeah.
But not 1992 Cinemax. But
Right, yeah.
it kind of goes to that adult sophistication aspect of it. And I think a lot of it works in this episode, but there still seems to be something missing.
Yeah, I think overall, I mean, again, I think the story part, I don't think enough of the episodes I saw had really cool guest stars. I mean, Ted Danson's like the highlight guest star.
Yeah.
The other people are people like you might go, well, I kind of know that person. But
And like you said, you made a good point about Alfre Woodard being, it's kind of like to use a cliche, the thankless role.
yeah, but it's, I mean, this is like a year before she was on St. Elsewhere, maybe 2. But she's delivering these lines of exposition with the exact same level of charisma and gravitas that she does everything. But it's just like, here's your sandwich or whatever.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was thinking, like, am I saying this just because I know what she would go on to do? But she does seem to stand out.
Yeah.
In such a small role, like in the couple of episodes, I don't think I've seen her do anything more than just deliver a couple of lines of like.
Right, and she's
like
not
you
even
said.
in every episode. There's one classic deal where she has a cold,
Oh,
and so the mother-in-law is filling in for her and doing a bad job of it.
oh gosh.
Spoils Rick's cover.
Yeah,
I like that aspect that he's always going undercover.
yeah,
And even the one with the psychic, like newspaper person wants to take his picture, and he's like, no pictures. I want to keep a low profile, or it would hurt undercover work.
wow.
But he always just goes undercover as sort of
Yeah,
middle class.
he's not like changing his like
White dude.
appearance or anything.
No, he's not like in a disguise as a homeless guy
Right.
or something.
It does seem like that psychic aspect of it would be a real impairment to undercover work or keeping a low profile, doesn't it?
If people know what you look like, yeah.
Yeah, if that gets out, I mean, people are going to be curious about it, and you're going to get publicity, and
Right.
that's something that they would have had to deal with eventually, I'm sure.
Yeah, maybe Marcia would have gotten to do more of that. She'd been able to take on a PR role,
Yeah,
deflecting.
right.
So yeah, I think the Catherine Hicks and Tim Matheson are really good, and their chemistry is good, and I like the music. I like the cat.
Mm-hmm. Good work by Hubie as Dickens.
Like a lot of mystery shows, it is comfortable and it's fine to watch. It's definitely not bad, but again, like they don't do enough with the gimmick, and the stories maybe aren't memorable enough.
I think they brought the best of what they had in the first episode, and just it seems very indistinguished from that point on, from what I've seen.
Yeah. Now, if you're going to watch another episode, I think it's episode 10, Rock is a Hard Place. I'm recommending that because, one, it's set in the music world, which I always love, of course. And it has a couple guest stars that are semi-recognizable. And there's a lot of mention of cocaine.
Oh, okay.
But it's a pretty, as far as these go, it's a pretty good story.
No.
And Amanda sings. She goes undercover, and
Wow.
she does an audition, a very 80s audition.
Well, you have me interested, and I'll probably check that out. And I'll say again that even though this isn't necessarily something that I would consider a lost classic, I'm really glad that it's on Prime Video for no apparent reason. I like that it's there.
Yeah.
I think everything should be on there. Go ahead, just put it on there.
If they were, I wish they would add it to a Art Hindle category.
Yeah, like he should
Like
have
they
his
need
own.
an Art Hindle category. Art Kindle. Maybe Art Hindle should do advertisements for the Amazon Kindle.
Art Hindle should have a memoir that could be on Kindle.
Yeah.
It'd be like, what's his catchphrase?
Art Hindle's out of here.
Yeah.
The Art Hindle story. How Art Hindle was almost the star of, almost made Hollywood history multiple times.
Yes.
By Art Hindle. With Art Hindle. And really, if you take anything away from this episode of our podcast, it's Art Hindle.
Yeah. Really, Art Hindle. And you know who should have written the foreword to the Art Hindle book?
Art Hindle?
No, actually, funny enough, Tim Matheson. An odd twist.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think he would have done it because he's such a good guy that, he's so amiable.
I forgot. There's something I wanted to say about him that I thought. Like, in terms of range, like a De Niro type person, like he doesn't seem to have a lot of range. And yet within what he does, I've seen him play. This guy, who's pretty just much an amiable guy, smug in Animal House, of course. I've seen him play, like, heels.
Yeah.
And sort of people who are, like on the West Wing, he was an unappreciated vice president, who had, he had an air of, it was pre-W, but he had an air of W, not like being dumb, but, or being perceived as dumb.
Yeah,
but
somebody be underestimated.
He was like from Texas, and but he expressed his lack of appreciation for that in sort of petty ways. And I thought he was good at that. And I got to give him, admire him for that.
Yeah.
To be able to just adjust in small ways and not.
Sure.
Again, like, he's not dressing up as a homeless guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. Could Art Hindle do all of those? Maybe he could. Maybe not.
He could have, but he turned him down.
Could he play the vice? Is there a vice PM? Prime Minister of Canada?
The vice prime minister.
A semi-prime minister.
Maybe.
The sub-prime minister.
Yeah, the sub-prime minister.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I think we've said enough on this.
I think so, yeah. It's a great example of, like, seeing the same piece of material done two different ways. If you want to check it out, that would be another good reason to watch this. But it's interesting. I enjoyed it, and it was something different, and good that it's on there. But yeah, probably its place in TV history is probably about where it should be, but I like having it there.
This episode brought to you exclusively by H-Del Records' new release from Art Hindle and the Hindels, Art Hindle's Outta Here, featuring such timeless classics as Hindle with Care, Hard to Hindle, How Much Is That Doggy in the Hindle, Hindle Hindle, and of course, Hindle in the Wind. As a bonus, you'll also receive Hindle's Messiah, recorded live with the Saskatoon Philharmonic. But wait, there's more! The first 200 orders will also receive a DVD of Art Hindle performing both parts in the famous courtroom showdown from A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth? How about you can't Hindle the truth?
Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.